DND number 12, Feed My Sheep. In Jesus' name, chapter 21. It is December 2nd, 7:20 a.m. Monday morning at the vacant home in Stevens Bluff, Georgia. Jericho Jones pulled up the long, steep driveway of the house where he would meet with CJ. The house sat way up on top of a large hill, possibly on the edge of the actual bluff of Stevens Bluff. It was an older but larger home, split level, probably built in the 1960s. It seemed to have a couple of acres of property around it, as the closest neighbor was not in his line of sight. It definitely needed renovation. It was weathered and tired looking. On the plus side, it was large and sat on beautiful land. There were some huge hardwoods and giant pines on each side of the house, and his experienced eye, a few of them needed to come down before they fell down on the house. Definitely a safety hazard. CJ's car was parked at the top of the drive in front of one of the 3 garage doors. Another car was parked behind CJ's, whom Jericho supposed was the real estate lady. The car was familiar, and Jericho thought it was probably the same woman who handled his rental home. Jericho pulled up to the top of the drive in front of the second garage door. The garage was situated on the right front side of the house. Jericho checked the time. He was 10 minutes early. He started to wait in the car, but then thought if he went on up and knocked on the door, it might hurry the real estate meeting along. He got out of the car, pulled on his coat, grabbed his phone, and headed to the front steps. He'd barely started to knock on the front door when it opened. The woman jumped back, startled. "Oh!" Jericho smiled. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." "Marjorie, isn't it?" She smiled. "Yes. And you're Jericho Jones. I found you the house you're renting." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I just came to see my friend." She nodded. "Yes, he told me that he was expecting a friend. I didn't realize it was you. So I was just leaving. Mr. Blackman is out on the deck. I already told him to just lock up when you leave." "Yes, ma'am, will do," Jericho said politely. He closed the door behind her and went up the short flight of stairs to a large living room area on the left. Behind it was a dining room and sliding glass doors that led to the deck. Jericho opened the doors and stuck his head out. "CJ?" CJ turned with a smile. "Hey, JJ, you're a bit early. Does that surprise you?" "Not at all." Jericho looked out past CJ and his mouth dropped open. "Wow." CJ nodded. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" "It's amazing. Wow, what a view." He walked to the far edge of the deck and leaned over the railing. "I mean, it's like living in a tree house." "Yep. And just think how the view will be in the spring and summer with all the trees in bloom, and in the fall with all the colors." Jericho looked straight down. "It's like you're on the side of a mountain. It's a really long way down and nothing but trees and brush." "It is, and though it's beautiful, it could be a drawback too, but Violet says she's always wanted to live in a house in the woods." "Well, this is definitely the woods, right? So I'll clear some of the flatter land that's off to the left of the house and make a nice yard where the kids can play." "It sounds really nice, CJ. And you wouldn't want to take down any of these trees in back because the view is breathtaking." "I know. The view is what actually sold me on the house, and the fact that it's actually been on the market a long time. And so it's going cheap." "So you are going to buy this place?" CJ nodded. "I know it doesn't look like much right now, but it's in the right price range, and it's large enough to house a large family." "Family?" "Yes, if Violet says yes." Jericho nodded. "So, you're going to pop the question?" "Yes, but first I have to tell her what happened 10 years ago, and we'll have to get past that." Jericho shook his head. "What are you talking about?" "There's nothing to get past. Bad things happen, CJ. You, of all people, should know that." CJ sighed and looked out over the view. He shook his head. "JJ, you don't know what really happened that night." I believe I know more than you do about what happened." CJ shook his head. "What you were told, what the news said about it, even what the police said about it, that isn't the truth." Jericho turned to look at CJ. CJ turned slowly and looked into Jericho's eyes. I need to tell you what really happened. I've been living in anguish for the past 10 years. When Mr. Nash spoke yesterday, telling us to move forward, to stop living in regret, I knew I had to come clean and tell you what really happened. Jericho started to shake his head, but CJ stopped him. Please, JJ, I need to tell you this. Jericho nodded. Okay, but it's freezing out here. Let's go inside. CJ nodded and then stopped. Wait, I wanted to take some pictures of the view to show Vi. Jericho pulled out his own phone. Mind if I take a few pics too? It really is an amazing view. I mean, all you can see is the tops of trees. They walked to the edge again and snapped off several pics. You know, CJ, one of the first things you're going to have to do is replace this deck. This thing is about to go. It might even be the original. If not, I'd say it's almost as old as the house. CJ nodded. I mean, at this point, I wouldn't let anyone else out here. You're one big guy short of a disaster, he said as he jumped a few times. The next few seconds seemed to last an eternity. The entire deck gave way. Both Jericho and CJ yelled as they went airborne, arms and legs flailing as they fell through the air. A brief thought went through Jericho's mind. This is it. The next thought, as the ground rushed toward him, was that pain was coming. The thought was a complete understatement. He hit the ground with an explosion of pain, but it didn't stop there. As soon as he tumbled down the very steep hillside. It registered on him that he was about to hit a tree, and it would at least stop his fall. It didn't stop him, but it slowed him, and finally he came to a halt about 10 yards farther. Breathing hard, his eyes closed with excruciating pain. He tried to get his bearing. The first thought was he was actually still alive. That was a miracle, seeing as how he had to have fallen at least 40 feet through the air. He was face down on the hill, his legs at a higher elevation than his head. He needed to reverse that. He lifted his head and tried to move his legs down and groaned with the agony. Breathing hard now, he tried again and was able to move his legs a few inches down. One leg moved easier than the other, and it dawned on him that one of his legs was broken badly, maybe in more than one place. He groaned again because the pain was so bad he couldn't suppress it. He still wanted to get his legs lower than his head, so he forced himself to roll onto his back. The pain was so bad, tears came to his eyes. Breathing in great gasps, he used his hips to pull his legs down in front of him, grunting with the torture. Finally, he was on his back, his legs down, his head elevated. He looked around, thinking he heard someone calling his name. Then he remembered CJ. He listened. Yes, CJ was calling him, which meant he was alive, and that was a wonderful thought, because Jericho had written off both their lives as he'd fallen through the air. Here, he answered. JJ, he heard again. He drew a deep breath. Here, he said louder. I'm here, CJ. The effort of speaking took all of his breath away, and he sat trying to catch his breath so he could call out again. But he heard a rustling through the leaves and underbrush, and he looked up to see CJ climbing up the hill slowly toward him. Jericho looked up at him and tried to smile. So happy to see you. I thought you were dead. I thought the same about you. Actually, don't know how we're still alive. I thought the same. Jericho wanted to say more about another miracle, but it was too hard to speak. CJ sat down beside him. How bad are you, JJ? Where are you hurt? Leg is broken, badly broken. Whole lot of pain. CJ nodded. And your head is bleeding. It is? Jericho reached up to touch the side of his head. His hand came back covered in blood. Well, how about that? It must have happened when I hit the tree. Just the one, CJ said with a smile. Jericho chuckled and then moaned. Ugh, don't make me laugh. He drew a ragged breath. How about you? How bad? I'm pretty sure my arm is broken, but I can walk, though I think my ankle is messed up. It may be a sprain. Jericho nodded and groaned again with the torment as another wave of intense pain washed over him. CJ looked closely at him. You're in bad shape, JJ. I got to get you out of here. Jericho nodded. You wouldn't happen to have held onto your phone when we fell? CJ shook his head. My phone is somewhere on this mountainside. Jericho sighed. Mine too. Well, that means I'm going to have to climb up that hill and get us help, CJ said. Do you think you can? I mean, it's pretty steep, and you only have one arm. Well, I gotta try, right? Jericho nodded. Yep. We have to be able to say you tried. He drew a deep breath and grunted as another wave washed over him. Oh, go slow. Be careful. You were always so bossy, CJ said. He grunted. Yep, it's part of my nature. I'm a natural-born leader. Natural-born pain in my butt, CJ returned. It was something they used to say to each other all through high school, and saying the words made CJ choke on the emotions. Jericho sighed. Be careful, he said again. CJ drew a deep breath and tried digging his toes into the ground as he moved up the hill, using his good arm to grab onto a bush or a tree or a rock, even a clump of grass. He started to slip several times. He did slip to his knees a few times. Looking up, he saw he still had a long way to go. The ground, which would usually be moist and wet and soft, was hard and frozen, and with only one arm to hold on with, it seemed impossible. And with that thought, the very next step, he slipped and tumbled back down the hill, grunting in pain as he went. Jericho saw him falling and reached out with his hand to try to grab him and actually ended up grabbing his coat briefly. CJ came to a stop a few yards past Jericho. He laid there, waiting for the pain to subside and for his breathing to slow. He then turned and climbed back up to Jericho. Fun times? Jericho asked, his breathing racket. CJ nodded. The best. I don't think you should try again. You were lucky you fell only 50 feet this time. I imagine there's probably a cliff just past that line of trees, he said, nodding further down the hillside. Who knows how far that drop is? CJ nodded. CJ, does anyone else know that we're here? He sighed. No, just me, you, and Marjorie. He looked at JJ. You didn't tell Rose by any chance? No, I didn't want her to question me about our conversation until I knew exactly what we were going to discuss. Okay, well, don't worry. We're going to be okay. Jericho nodded. I mean, when I don't show up for work this morning, my guys will start looking for me. Except they won't know where to look. You don't, by any chance, let them follow your location on your phone? Nope, but if we get out of this alive, I will remedy that. CJ nodded. Well, anyway, I'm an Ameritech agent. We wear GPS trackers. He touched the chain around his neck. When I don't show up for my assignment this morning, they'll call Dalton, and he'll track me. What time were you supposed to be there? 10. Well, then, we just have to hold on for a few hours. Right. He blew out a breath. A few hours in the freezing cold with you in excruciating pain and a head wound. Jericho frowned. Well, we're alive. When did you get to be such a negative kind of guy? CJ shrugged. I guess when I woke up in the hospital to the news that my family was dead. Jericho sighed. I'm sorry, CJ. I wanted to be there for you. I'd arranged everything. You were going to come live with my family. We were going to help you recover and get on with your life. But when I went to see you again, you were gone. I tried to find you, and finally, I figured you simply didn't want to be found. So I left you alone. But CJ, I didn't desert you. Is that what you think? Is that why you wouldn't talk to me? CJ shook his head. Not even close. Jericho sighed deeply and grunted as he tried to move his leg to a more comfortable position. Well, we have a couple of hours to kill. Let's have our talk. Tell me what you wanted to say. Sorry. You set up on the deck that things didn't go down like I believe they went down. CJ sighed and nodded. That's right. But before I tell you what really happened, will you please tell me what happened to you that night? I need to know so that I can piece it all together. Jericho nodded. Okay. Are you sure? Because it's not pretty. I'm sure. Jericho drew a deep breath as his mind went back to the fateful night that had begun with spending the night with his best friend. Well, I woke up. Do you remember that there'd been a big storm and the power was out? CJ nodded. So I woke up and I smelled smoke. I was so dumb, I thought you'd gone downstairs to the kitchen to make yourself something to eat, and I was going to go down and tease you about your cooking. I grabbed the flashlight that you'd given to me earlier when I went to the bathroom, and I headed downstairs. And as soon as I got in the hallway, the flashlight reflected off the smoke. It was everywhere, thick smoke. I could barely breathe. I made it down to the kitchen, and you weren't there. The door leading out to the garage was open, and I saw a light, so I headed out there. Well, the light turned out to be a fire. It was totally engulfed, climbing the walls, the ceiling, your father's car, and then I saw you lying on the floor. The fire was all around you. You were totally unconscious. You'd smacked your head on the concrete floor. The back of your head was all bloody. The garage door was up, and I grabbed you and pulled you out and laid you in the driveway. He stopped for a moment as the horror of that night came back into his mind. He drew a deep breath and looked into CJ's face. I knew I had to go get your family out. I went to your parents' room to wake them, to get your dad to help me get the kids. But when I went in their room, he stopped and shook his head. He cleared his throat. They were both unconscious. They were unresponsive. So I left them, he said, as sobs welled up in his chest. I left them, he repeated softly, as tears welled in his eyes and fell over onto his cheeks. He blew out a breath. He glanced at CJ, who also had tears running down his face. I headed to your little sister's room, but she wasn't there. I thought maybe she'd been afraid of the dark and went to your brother's room, so I rushed to his room. I remembered too late that your brother's room was right over the garage. The moment I stepped into the room, I fell through the floor into the garage. That was the last thing I remember before I woke up in the hospital. He sat there in silence for a minute. I learned later that your parents died of smoke inhalation, and that your brother and sister probably also died of smoke inhalation before they were consumed in the fire. He looked back up into CJ's eyes. I'm so sorry, CJ. I did everything wrong. I know that now. I've learned. I try every day to make things right. CJ shook his head. You don't have to apologize. You tried, and because you tried, you lost your scholarship to play football and your chance to go pro. Jericho shook his head. No, CJ, it wasn't meant to be. I know that now. No, I'm the one who's sorry, JG. I'm sorry I ruined your career, and I'm sorry because He stopped and drew a deep breath. I killed my family. It was all my fault. They said the fire was caused by faulty wiring and spilled gasoline, but it wasn't. It was caused by me. I don't know why they would say that. They're supposed to be professionals. They should know it wasn't the wiring. It was me. Jericho started to disagree, but somehow knew to keep quiet. Go on, he said softly. CJ sniffed and drew a deep breath. I woke up. The power was still off. I thought I heard someone downstairs, and I went to see if maybe Dad needed some help with something. I got into the kitchen, and no one was there, but I heard some talking in the garage, and I opened the door and stepped out. He breathed. There were 3 guys in the garage. They wore masks. They were breathing, They were breaking into Dad's car. One of the guys looked up at me when I came out the door, and he said he was going to do me a favor and let me live. He told me to just turn around and go back inside, and all that would happen is the car would be gone and the insurance will replace it. He stopped and shook his head. But oh no, not me. I had all this big man pride. These punks were not going to come into my house and steal my father's car and me just go hide away like while they do it. I was a big, strong guy, so I told them to leave or I was going to make them leave. They came at me and we fought. And I know I hurt a couple of them. One of them threw that old gallon gas can at me, and I knocked it away with my arm. That's how the gas got spilled. I think I was winning the fight, but then one of them pulled out a lighter and threatened to light the gas and me on fire. And while he had my attention, another guy hit me in the back of the head with a big pipe wrench. That was the last thing I remember until I woke up in the hospital days later. I suppose the guy decided to light it up and the spilled gas anyway. The thing is, JJ, if I'd done what the guy said, just gone in the house and turned a blind eye, my family would be alive. His voice choked as he broke down into tears and he sniffed. My own pride killed them, and I just couldn't let it go. Of course you couldn't, CJ. I would have done the same thing. Think about it, JJ. You would have gone inside, probably gone to wake up your dad, called the police, but I made a stupid decision to fight and ended up killing my mom, my dad, my sweet little sister, and my brother, who looked up to me. He stopped to get his emotions under control. She was just a baby, you know. She just had her 6th birthday. And my brother, all he wanted to do was play ball like me. He sniffed again. My mom thought I hung the stars, and my dad told me almost every day how proud he was of me. And it was all misplaced. All of it. Wait now, CJ. That's not true. You were a great guy. You are a great guy. You couldn't have known that trying to defend your father's property could lead to what it did. You couldn't have known. Jericho stopped talking as he tried to get his pain under control so that he could speak the right words to his friend, to the guy who'd been his best friend forever, to the guy he thought of as a brother from another mother. He shuddered for a moment and then got control. But before he could go on, CJ spoke again. I couldn't face you, JJ. I was so ashamed. I killed my family. I destroyed your life. I spent like 2 years afterward in an alcoholic daze. I wanted to die. I bought a gun, and I tried to shoot myself in the head several times, but each time I chickened out. Thank God, JJ muttered. CJ sighed. Who would have thought that I would run into you 10 years later in the middle of nowhere? Yeah, who would have thought, Jericho said sarcastically. What is that supposed to mean? God is trying to bring you back. There's no such thing as a coincidence. He brought you and I back together so that you can finally heal. But CJ, the guy I see now, you've put yourself back together. CJ shook his head. No, that was Mr. Tanner. I heard about Ameritech and thought it might be something I could do that would at least give me some focus. I applied and got turned down. So I applied again, and they set up a special interview with Agent Tanner. He took an interest in me. I'd been turned down because of a few DUIs, and he did an extensive background check on me, and he hired me. He took me under his wing. He's a great man. I agree, and he has awesome daughters. CJ smiled. I agree. Jericho started to shiver, but forced his words out. CJ, you obviously are trying to get your life back together. And if you took Mr. Nash's words seriously, then you know you're supposed to be letting go of the regret, not wallowing in it. So I'm going to tell you something. Let's pretend for a minute that what you say is correct, that you made a lousy decision and that decision ended up getting your family killed. What was Mr. Nash trying to say? That Jesus has cleansed you with his own blood and he wants you to move forward, right? CJ nodded. Well, that's what I'm trying to do. That's why I wanted to talk to you. Jericho grunted in pain and gave a soft moan. I get it. So it's time to let go of your regret and your guilt. Your family didn't die in vain if you move forward and do something with your life. But if you don't, then what will you say to them when you see them again? I'm sorry, Mom and Dad, but all I could do was throw my life away. If you live for them, CJ, make something of your life, get married, have children, stay close to God, then you'll be able to look them in the eye when you see them again. I want to do that. But I needed to talk to you. I needed you to know the truth. I needed you to know that I wasn't mad at you. I was uncomfortable. I was too ashamed to look you in the eye. I destroyed your career, and I need you to forgive me. Oh, CJ, there's nothing to forgive. I'm happy. I don't think I was really wanting to spend my life playing football. I became a firefighter, and a darn good one. And I started my own company teaching firefighter specialists, and I'm doing good in this world, and I'm helping people, and I'm happy. He stopped and shuddered and gagged. He turned to the side and dry heaved. What's wrong? Are you sick? Breathing hard, Jericho grimaced. Maybe. It's really cold, don't you think? Abnormally cold for here, yes, but not that cold. The hill is blocking us from the wind. CJ frowned. You're scaring me. What's wrong? How much time do we have left before someone realizes we're missing, do you think? CJ shrugged. Probably at least another hour or more. What's wrong? Jericho drew a ragged breath. Well, if I were to self-diagnose, I'd say I'm abnormally cold. So cold. I think it's possible that I'm bleeding internally. I'm probably going into shock. My head is pounding. I probably have a concussion. I'm nauseated, and I think my blood pressure's dropping. He stopped to shiver, and his teeth started chattering. CJ stood. I'm going to slide in behind you here and try to get you warm. Jericho didn't argue. He grunted as CJ moved him a little to get behind him. CJ then wrapped his one good arm around JJ and pressed his chest against JJ's back. Hold on there, JJ, CJ said firmly. You hold on. Jericho nodded as he tried to do just that. Sorry, that scene got me all choked up. Got to clear my throat, wipe my eyes. New scene. It's still December 2nd. It's 8:45 a.m. Monday morning at the Tanner home, Pine Forest, Georgia. Gabe sat the barbell back in its cradle and sat up. Something wasn't right. He wasn't feeling well. Was it him or was it someone else? He was nauseated. His breath was coming fast. He wanted to get in the workout before breakfast because he had a whole day scheduled to be with Taylor and his sisters. And he had time scheduled to be with the new babies and hold them and rock them and sing to them while his mom took a shower and did other things that she felt needed tending to. So this little bout of whatever was going on was not welcome, but it was growing steadily worse, and finally he rose and made his way upstairs. The family was in the kitchen. Rose was at the stove. His mother was sitting at the table nursing Gentian. Iris was in her new booster seat, singing a song to Isaiah, whom was being held by his father. Heather and Nolan were both at the sink doing more kissing than cleaning, and Violet was cutting up fruit at the island. Two sisters were absent. Lily was at the inn working, and Daisy was saying goodbye to Brody. Gabe came in and placed his hand on the wall to steady himself. Dad, he said breathlessly. Keegan looked up quickly at the sound of distress in his son's voice. What's up, Gabe? He drew a breath. Dad, there's something wrong. The entire kitchen got quiet. Can you give me more information? I don't think it's me, but it's someone we're close to. I'll call the girls, Lizzie said immediately. Keegan nodded, then looked back to Gabe. What else? There's so much pain, and I'm so cold. Dad, I think I'm dying. I thought you said it wasn't you. It's all a blur. I just recognize the way this feels, this dying. So someone is dying that's close to us, Rose asked. Gabe looked at her closely. Rose? I'm right here, baby. I'm okay. He nodded. Where's JJ? Rose's face paled. Oh, well, I think he's at work or will be soon. Call him, Gabe said as he clutched his stomach. Hand shaking, Rose pulled out her phone and called him. She waited. Finally, she ended the call. Well, there's no answer. But if he's working, he would turn his phone to vibrate. I think Jericho might be with CJ, Violet offered. I think they were going to meet up this morning. Where? Rose asked. I don't know, Violet said. Gabe sank to the floor. Please, make it stop. I'll call CJ, Violet said, but her call ended same as Rose's call to Jericho. Keegan nodded. I can track CJ. He went to his office. Gabe lay down on the floor, breathing hard. His mother handed off the baby to Heather and knelt down beside him. She took his hand. Sweetheart, breathe. Remember, it's not you. You're feeling what someone else is feeling. Try to separate yourself. I'm trying. At that moment, Gabe's phone went off. Lizzie pulled it from his pocket and answered it. Hello, Jeffy. Yes, he's in bad shape. He's lying here on the floor. He's in a lot of pain. Yes, hold on. She put the phone on speaker and held it close to Gabe. Gabe, the pain is leaving you. Only the knowledge of what's happening is staying in your brain, but you can let go of the pain now, she moaned. Someone is in great pain. He's very cold. Was it a car accident? Rose asked, her voice showing the panic she felt. Jeffy moaned. I can't see clearly enough. I don't think it's a car accident. Gabe, take a deep breath and clear your mind and talk to Jesus. Gabe nodded, and almost immediately he began to calm and the pain began to subside. Keegan came back in. CJ is at a house over in Stevens Bluff. I've contacted Dalton, and he's dispatching agents. I've also contacted the Stevens Bluff Police Department, and they're sending officers to the address. Rose's phone rang, and she didn't recognize the number, but she answered it and put it on speaker. Hello? Hi, Rose. This is Jimmy Calloway, JJ's partner. I'm sorry to bother you, but I can't reach him, and he's never late. I mean, never. I'm hoping he had breakfast with you. No, he didn't, and we think there might be something wrong. What do you mean? It's too much to tell right now, Keegan answered. Jimmy, this is Keegan Tanner. I'm sending agents to an address. There might be some kind of trouble or accident. You might want to get your equipment and head over there. I'm sending you the address. Thank you, sir. We're on it. New scene. Jericho shivered. He gave another grunt as the pain shot from his leg up through his entire body. He struggled to draw a deep breath. CJ, he whispered. Yep, I'm right here, buddy. We're going to be out of here soon. No, CJ, you got to listen to me. I'm listening. If I don't make it, I need for you. Please don't finish that sentence, JJ. Jericho drew several breaths. You got to listen to me. Just listen. If I don't make it, I need two things from you. First, Rose. He stopped as emotions welled up that he didn't expect. He swallowed. Rose. I mean, we haven't dated all that long, but I swear, I freaking love that girl, that woman. And I want you to tell her that for me. Tell her she's the best and that she needs to be strong. She seems tough, CJ, but really her heart is vulnerable. Tell her to not go back to her ex, and she'll find someone good. And God will take care of her and send her someone good. JJ, stop this. It's ridiculous. He moaned. And the second thing. Damn it, CJ. Don't let this throw you. You just got clear. God sent a message to you and you immediately acted on it. And that's good. So don't let this send you back to that dark place. You keep moving forward into the light. You marry Violet. You make a bunch of babies. You live a good life. Well, now it's your turn to listen to me, JJ. You will hold on. You will tough this out. Don't you dare think you can leave me. Damn it, JJ. I just got my act together. You're my brother. You're all I have left. And you can't leave me now. You have to fight, JJ. Fight. Do you hear me? He waited for an answer. JJ? He pulled JJ's head back so he could see his face. His skin was pale, his eyes were closed, but he was still breathing. JJ? Still no answer. CJ wrapped both his arms around him, regardless of the pain. He looked upward and prayed, Dear God, please do not take him too. Please, Father. Yes, I'm begging you. I know you're real. I know you answer prayers. Answer mine. Grant me this plea. Please don't take him too. Please. You took my father and mother, my brother and sister, and yeah, I haven't handled that well. Mostly because I know it was my fault. But don't take JJ. Not JJ. He's too good. He prayed and cried over the only person left from his childhood who knew him and understood him. Please, God. Please. In Jesus' name, in Jesus' name, in Jesus' name, he whispered over and over and over. It seemed he prayed for hours when he thought he heard something above. He thought he heard someone yell something. They're here. I can see them. They're down here. In only a few minutes, Jimmy Calloway, Max Hooks, Micah, Jalen, Luke, and a few others from Pine County Emergency Services were down the steep hill, secured by tethers. They immediately affirmed life and spoke gently to CJ. Are you injured? Jimmy asked. My arm is broken. Help JJ. Can you tell us his injuries? Max asked. He said his leg was broken probably in more than one place. He said his blood pressure was dropping and that he was probably bleeding internally. He looked up toward the house. The deck gave way. They nodded. Yeah, we saw that. Okay, now we're going to pull you away from JJ so that you can take care of him, okay? So that we can take care of him, okay? Luke said. CJ nodded and grunted as two of the paramedics lifted him up and away from JJ. He watched as JJ was laid down. They worked so quickly it was hard for CJ to keep up with what they were doing. Starting IVs, checking blood pressure, speaking to doctors on phones. They surrounded him, working together as if they could read each other's minds. He looked up when he heard a chopper overhead and watched as a rescue basket descended down through the trees. JJ was loaded, quickly secured and lifted. It all happened so fast, at least in CJ's mind. The basket went up, JJ was taken in, the chopper turned and was gone. He watched it silently and was finally pulled from his trance by one of JJ's men. We're going to help you up the hill. Can you walk? He nodded. Anything else hurt besides your arm? I think I sprained my ankle. Okay. Listen, I'm going to put this strap around you. You won't fall. Let me carry your weight. CJ nodded as the man circled his waist with the strap and then helped CJ move up the hill. Whatever they were using to help CJ up the hill, it made it almost effortless on CJ's part. In only a minute, he was being placed on a gurney at the top of the hill beside the house and was being assessed. Agent Blackman, a fellow Ameritech agent, said as he took hold of CJ's hand. CJ focused on him. Agent Austin, CJ said, good to see you. Austin nodded, I bet. So Deputy Director Tanner asked me to let you know that he'll meet you at the hospital. CJ nodded, and the agent smiled. It's a miracle, you know. The two of you fell from that deck, right? CJ nodded, yes. That's about 30, maybe 40 feet. I don't know how anyone could survive that. CJ thought about that. It was a miracle. Hopefully that meant God was going to save JJ. He looked up. Do we know JJ's condition? No, not yet. Jimmy leaned over and secured a strap across CJ's chest. Let's get you to the hospital, he said as they lifted CJ into the back of an ambulance. New scene. It's still December 2nd. It's 11 a.m. Monday morning, Pine County Hospital, Pine Forest, Georgia. Keegan quietly stepped inside the small chapel room at the hospital and went to sit next to Violet in the last pew. He put his arm around her. Hey, Daddy, she whispered. Hey, sweetie. CJ's being released soon and is asking for you. I want to go to him, but I don't want to leave Rose. He nodded. I'll stay with Rose. How's she doing? He whispered, his eyes on Rose, who was sitting in the front pew. Not good, Dad. I was sitting with her, but she wanted to be alone, so I came back here. Okay, I'm going to go talk to her. You go see your guy. Violet kissed her father's cheek and quickly left. Keegan said a quick prayer and headed to the front pew and took a seat next to Rose. "How you doing, honey?" "I want to be alone." He shook his head. "Well, sorry, but that's not going to happen. You used to want to go to your room and pout and feel sorry for yourself when you were little. I'm not going to let you slip back into that routine. You've grown and matured way past that. And why do I feel like a little baby who just wants to curl up in a ball and cry?" "Because you're grieving, sweetie. You're acting as if he's already passed, and he hasn't. He's alive. They're working on him. Don't give up and don't give in, my strong girl. That's not what Jericho needs from you right now. He needs your strength. He needs your prayers, and you need to come back to the waiting room with me." Ricky was able to arrange a private waiting area for us. There is a large group of people there praying together and wondering why you've chosen to separate yourself. "I wasn't trying to diss anyone. I just needed time to think and get my act together." "You don't have to have your act together, honey. The man you love is fighting for his life. You can fall apart if you feel like it. Just do it where the people who love both you and Jericho can be there to support you." She sniffed. "Did I tell you that I'm in love with Jericho?" Keegan smiled. "You didn't have to. It's obvious. Have you told him?" "No. It was too soon, and now I may not get the chance." "Well, stop talking like that. Come on back to the waiting room with me." She wiped at her cheeks. "Who's there?" "So many. His 5 employees, our whole family. The Kinos, Gabe and Taylor are live streaming a prayer circle in about 10 minutes. Jody and John are here. Lisa, Chaz, and Lena, Rebecca Murphy, Dalton, and several of my agents. The Nash Smiths, the Grandmaster Kino, both Adams families, Jeffy and Cam, and the Lees are zooming in for the big prayer circle. Pastor Tim is here. Mayor Bradbury is here. The fire chief is here. Sheriff Ty is here. It seems Jericho has touched many people during his short time in our community." Rose sniffed and nodded. He's such a good man, Daddy. He's such a good guy in so many ways, and he fits right into our family. He's a lot like you, Dad, and that makes him the right guy for me. Please, God," she suddenly cried aloud, "please don't take him from me." Keegan sighed heavily and added his own silent prayer to that plea. "Come on, baby girl. Let's go pray with everyone." He stood and pulled her to her feet, and they walked up the aisle together, and he had a flash, just a quick flash, like a scene in his head, of Rose in a wedding dress, walking down an aisle in a church on his arm. He smiled. It was a gift, and it immediately erased his fears. They got to the large room. It was full but very quiet. People spoke in low tones. A few babies gurgled and cooed. Iris was sitting on Nolan's lap. Daisy, Lily, and Heather immediately came to hug Rose, whispering to her and telling her that Jericho's going to be okay. And a minute later, Violet and CJ walked into the room. Everyone quieted because they hadn't heard what had actually taken place. Keegan immediately approached CJ and took his good hand. "What's your diagnosis?" "I broke my arm. I twisted my ankle, but there are no tears of the ligament, so it will heal quickly. I have some bumps and scrapes, which is obvious, and I have some big bruises on my back and thigh, but that's about it." Keegan shook his head. "It's a miracle. You fell all that way and came away with only those injuries." CJ sighed. "Yeah. But JJ didn't fare as well. Have you heard anything yet?" Keegan nodded. "He's in surgery. He tore his spleen, broke his leg in 3 places, and like you, has a bunch of contusions and abrasions." "So he was right," CJ said. He gave a self-diagnosis and said he was probably bleeding internally. He said his blood pressure was dropping because of that, and he was probably not going to make it." "But he did make it so far," Max said, "and he didn't die before they got to him, and I'm sure they've given him blood and are repairing his spleen, and he's going to be okay." Everyone nodded. "That's correct," they heard a voice say. Gabe held up a phone. "It's Dr. Kino, on the line. Go ahead, Jeffy." "They got to him just in time," she said, "much later, and he may have bled out internally. It's called exsanguination, but that didn't happen because God didn't let that happen. He allowed Gabe to be alerted, and because of that, you acted quickly and found him quickly before he was able to bleed out. So that tells me that God isn't finished with Jericho yet. So everyone give thanks and praise God for that. Jericho is going to be okay. Rose sniffed away her tears. If Jeffy felt that way, then she had confidence that Jericho would be okay. It's time for the prayer circle, Gabe said. I'm going live here on a Zoom, so don't anyone say anything mean about, well, anyone. He chuckled. That joke doesn't work when there's so many people. The room gave a soft laugh, and Gabe's eyes lit up as he looked at his phone. Hey, so Jericho's parents are driving down here, but they just signed on to the call. And Jericho's brother's at the airport catching a flight into Atlanta and also just joined the call. So, hello to Jericho's family. We here all really love Jericho, and that means we love his family too, and we're about to all pray for him. Gabe looked around the room. I guess I'll start and go to my right. If you don't feel inclined to pray, it's okay. Just motion to the person next to you to go ahead. Let's do this while I have so many prayer warriors on the call. Father in heaven, hey, God, it's me again. They prayed over Jericho for a good 30 minutes. Gabe's words were, as always, warm and heartfelt. Taylor echoed Gabe. Ricky and Bree Kino prayed eloquently and reminded everyone that no matter what God does, it's His will that they want. It's His will that they want, but prayed that His will would be to heal Jericho. Pastor Tim also prayed eloquently, as did Keegan and Lizzie. Heather and Nolan prayed, and all the Towner girls, and even Iris, who proclaimed her love for Jericho. The Apples prayed, the Stewarts prayed, even the mayor prayed, and CJ's prayer was cryptic, making many wonder what had transpired between CJ and Jericho, and a few of Jericho's men also prayed for him, and the last one to pray was Rose, who through her tears thanked God that He gave Gabe a heads up, and that miraculously both men lived through a fall that would have easily killed anyone, and she gave thanks for the two men, for their strength, for their goodness, and for simply being a part of their lives. She asked for healing, and that the pain would ease, and for peace of mind, and for the safe travels of Jericho's family as they make their way to his side. And then she quietly asked God to give her a chance to show Jericho just how much she loved him. And when she uttered those words, many people looked up at her with a smile on their faces. And once the prayer circle was finished, people divided into different groups. Most, though, wanted to hear from CJ what happened, and he filled them in. He told them that he and JJ met to discuss some old times, that they were on the deck looking at the amazing view, that Jericho had just warned him that the deck would need to be replaced, that he jumped a few times to show CJ that it was unsteady, that the entire thing collapsed. He told them that he immediately went to find Jericho, and when he did, Jericho was in a lot of pain. They'd both dropped their phones. It was too steep to climb up one-handed. They decided to wait for help since he was an agent and would eventually be tracked. They had a long, very serious talk about life and death, and then Jericho, obviously suffering, gave his self-diagnosis. They thought they were going to have to wait another hour or so before help came, and he was glad they didn't because maybe JJ would be dead by then. But just as he finished his telling of things from his point of view, the doctor came into the room. He looked around. Family of Mr. Jones? Keegan stepped forward. For now, yes. His family's en route and won't be here for a few hours. The doctor nodded. Okay, well, Mr. Jones is in recovery. We've repaired his spleen. He's received a large amount of blood. His leg has been set and is cast, and with some physical therapy, should be back to normal eventually. The laceration on his head has received 12 stitches, and he does have a concussion. His prognosis is for a full recovery. He should be awake within the next hour and will be in ICU for the next few days. If he does well, he'll be moved to a regular room. Can I see him? Rose asked. The doctor looked at her. You are? I'm his girlfriend. He nodded. When he wakes up, we'll make sure it's okay with him, and we'll let some visitors in, but we don't want to tire him. She nodded. I understand. And that is the end of chapter 21. Whew, that was hard.